Here's what happened. Yesterday, I hosted a workshop for how to be consistent with your habits for optimizing your health. And I talked about how I had felt like I had to be perfect in my communication for a lot of years. And it's been something I've been working on of just expressing what comes through for the words, the truth, and not feeling like I got to hold back or feel like I got to overthink it too much, or feel like I got to wear the mask and like be on. And it really resonated where I thought, okay, this would be important to actually have a conversation with you about this. Because if you're in a similar situation where you think you're overthinking what can feel like every single word, that's draining. Like I'm sure you're feeling that too, where it's draining. And so that could lead you to the first red flag of burnout, which is chronic exhaustion. And that's something I want to help you to avoid. And so what I want to tell you, it's not an overnight process. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a process where you got to put in those reps. But it is possible to notice a big difference from where you start to where you're going to end up. This is Make Burnout Extinct. I'm Robert David Weeks. Thank you for taking the time to be here. I know you could be doing a bunch of different stuff, a lot of distractions out there. And so by you being here, that says something to you. It's a moment to celebrate. And so let's get present into the space before getting started. I always, say we've got a lot of shit we've been dealing with to get to this point. Got a lot of shit we got to deal with afterwards. So let's take a deep inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. Let's get settled in. Inhale. I'm going to stretch it out on my exhale. Oh, yeah. There we go. Oh, yes. That's good. All right. Welcome back. And if you're new, welcome. If you haven't done it yet, you can subscribe and follow the show for the latest episodes. I got a few commitments too for you. First one is to continue to grow this show. So by you subscribing and following this show, it helps to honor that commitment and to continue to grow this movement that's been built around this one mission of Make Burnout Extinct that gets me fucking fired up for what's happening. And it's been a little over 7 months since the launch of the show, and I'm excited for already what's happened and where this is headed into the future. And then the second commitment I have for you is to be honest with you, to share to the best of my ability the full experience of what it takes to make burnout extinct. Because leading up to my burnout in 2018, after that social media conference where 500 people came together, I lied so much along the way where I felt I couldn't really share what was going into what we're about to talk about. So with feeling like I had to be perfect, it really caused this pressure and this overwhelm to build to the point where at the end of the event, I felt it was one of the main reasons I hit my burnout. And so honesty is such an important value of mine now. And it feels just like the weight on my shoulders were dropped, just being able to share the truth of what's coming up in life. And I've had those moments. I've had to courageously step into that, and I'll get into it more. But what I want to do with you with this show is to be honest of not just sharing the results, which for this three results in the simplest form is feeling more energized in your day. Feeling connected to that aliveness of life and not just going through your emotions in your day. I'm sure you've experienced that. Nobody's perfect, going back to that one. So we've all experienced it on some level. And then the third is feeling excited about the momentum that's being built to move towards the vision you have for your life and who it is you want to become. So it's all of that. And it's the hard work. It's showing up, putting those reps in when people aren't watching you. It's when you get off track with your habits, what I call the burnout proof habits that are there to support you. It's remembering to honor all the feelings that can come up and the tornado thoughts that can happen, and then realizing you can get back on track and continue to show up and put those reps in. So it's all of this for the experience. And my goal with this show is to share with you, to the best of my ability, the true experience of what it takes, because I want to remind you that it's absolutely possible for you to make burnout extinct. Let's get into it. Thanks for being a part of this. So today, what I want to talk about is how you can feel like you're overthinking every single word and how it is draining. And so I want to talk about this problem and specifically dive deeper into what is behind this overthinking, what could be coming up, thinking back to us as human beings, and even you can look at it in your life and reflect on that in your life for where this comes up. And so I want to get into that problem. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to share with you some simple strategies, those that I've implemented as I've navigated my own public speaking. And again, public speaking can be with one person in conversation or it can be with a group of many. But as an entrepreneur, it's like there's a lot of conversations that have got to happen to get the message out. I think of this mission right now, make burnout extinct, to get that out. And so it's being able to remember these simple strategies that you can implement right after this convo. And you can start that momentum for yourself, because I'm always come back to where you start isn't going to be where you end up. And so it is remembering to start small. I think it's really important for your best chances to help with having these habits stick for the long term. It is starting small and building the momentum from there. So we'll get into those strategies, and I'll have some space too for us to like reflect and take a moment to absorb all the info, because it's going to feel like it's fucking a lot. Is what it can feel like right now for you, for this overwhelm that's building. And I want to acknowledge that, coming back to the problem of overthinking every single word, what feels like every single word, that draining feeling. Right now, as we're getting into this and getting prepped, you could feel this intense bubbling sensation in the body of overwhelm, of pressure, of tension. And you're like, shit, I don't really know if I want to deal with this right now and actually address it, right? That's where we can want to suppress things. That's where I think about it for you. You could have so many moments where you're like, I'll get to this later at another time. Like, I don't want to deal with it right now. And so it's going to be uncomfortable. And I want to tell you that with anything new, there can be natural resistance that can come up from the body, because it creates uncertainty. And so the body does want to keep you safe. And that is where you have this resistance that can come up that can cause you to get pulled. And I think about it for the burnout beast, this burnout beast to pull you back to your old ways, which can feel super draining when it comes to overthinking. And so when I dove deeper into this to understand it, not only through my own personal experience, but just seeing the patterns that are out there, what it comes back to for me is this fear of rejection. And there can be a lot of rejection as I'm thinking about that with my own personal experience as an entrepreneur. Is like there can be so many opportunities for rejection, where then there are times where you don't actually go out there and see those opportunities and be able to take action towards those opportunities. And that's where you can miss so many opportunities. And I have another conversation where I talk about that, of how to bounce back after, when you miss an opportunity. And so this fear of rejection, well, where does it come from? And I dove deeper into it, and I think back to, okay, when way back in the day as human beings, we were in tribes for survival. And so to even imagine, even right now, as I'm feeling it, like I can get like some chills. It's like to imagine getting kicked out of the tribe, rejected. The probability of survival, super low. Those chances, I don't know the exact percentage, but we can imagine like super low. And so, of course, that's then going to stay with us as we get to now where we are in the modern day, but the environment isn't the same as it was back then. There are so many opportunities all around us, so many resources all around us. I mean, you listening to this or watching this, I mean, you have access to almost I think about it, for all the information out there, almost all the information, human information out there through that device. So we got to put things in perspective, but also realize why it can come up. And so going back into this feeling of needing to survive, what can happen is then when you get into these moments of speaking with one person or speaking in front of a group of people, there can be this stress response that can come up from the body because of the potential perceived threats, because you feel like you got to hold back and not share what's coming up for you, the truth. You feel you got to be perfect. You feel like you got to wear the mask, wear the armor. You don't want to be hurt. You don't want that pain of rejection or the pain of judgment or the pain of people disagreeing with you. And that could be based off of your own personal experiences, right? Things coming up for you in your life. How I relate to that was, growing up, both my parents were teachers, and they both taught me. And so they didn't like push it on me, but it just became this belief that I had to be perfect and like the golden child. And then when I got into high school, I'm the youngest of three boys, two older brothers. We all played sports. They were really well known in high school and got the awards. And then I'm coming up here a few years later, and I'm known as a weak's brother as I go into high school. So there's an expectation that's put on me of like how I should show up, how they want me to act. And so then that pressure gets placed on like, oh, this is supposed to be my reality, which just is not true. Like getting into being an adult, you got to make your decisions. And it's so important to remember, common sense wise, that you get to make these changes in your life. Like that's where growth happens, is being able to get into situations that can feel very uncomfortable and that are new, and being able to courageously move forward with that. And I know that when it comes to the public speaking side of it and overthinking, what feels like every single word, that can be really hard to move through that, and to be able to create a new habit of sharing truly, like sharing the truth and expressing that out, not thinking constantly about the words that you're going to say, but trusting that they're just going to come through you. It does feel like a spiritual process in that, where you're just letting the words pour out from your heart. And what I can tell you is that you can make progress on this and be able to notice differences. I notice that it's still something I work on today, and it still comes up because, again, perfection doesn't exist. And so you are going to have those days where you get off track, but you absolutely can continue, it is possible for you to make changes in this area of your life. And I want to make sure you remember that and give yourself permission to believe, even if you can't believe that you're going to be, able to communicate, the majority of the time, and expressing what is the truth that's coming up for you. It's just remembering that it's possible for a change. And it's so important to be able to come back to recognizing where this can come from for you. So it's reflecting on, okay, did you have situations that came up where, if it was in the classroom or with friends, or even in your adult life, where there was pain around this? Because I come back to, there are patterns in the body. Like everything happens for a reason for the body. And so to have resistance come up in these situations where you're speaking, it's noticing, well, why is that? What is the message that's trying to come through from the body? And usually it can relate to like, oh, well, there was pain here in the past. And so there's an expectation that there's going to be pain if you don't stick to the habit of being, either quote, perfect, or being on, or wearing the mask. But again, the result is going to be draining. It's this feeling of feeling drained and exhausted. And it goes back to then burnout. You're going to be dragged by the burnout piece to the first red flag of burnout, which is chronic exhaustion. And then it creates this domino effect of, then you get into feeling this negativity, and then you're performing terribly and not showing up in situations. And then ultimately you hit burnout, which, again, for how I define burnout, is a major life transition that is forced on you by your body. And so for me, leading up to the social media conference, with that, like with all that lying that was happening, I then got to the point where at the end I was physically and emotionally exhausted. I made tons of financial mistakes. And then it was so hard for me to even get out of bed. Like that recovery process was rough. And I go back to how important this is, of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's important to deal with this on the front end, so you don't have to deal with that intense recovery process and a lot of unnecessary suffering that I wouldn't want on anyone. And so someone that comes to mind with this, that inspires me, for just like, I think of this. There are moments in history where people just share the truth, right? And you're going to deal with the consequences. You have different people's agendas that come into this. You have people that are just pissed off at you and disagree and will judge you. Like that happens. And I get you if there's a lot of fear that bubbles up in this area, a lot of overwhelm and pressure that you notice, because I want to tell you that it is intense. It is can feel overwhelming. You're not alone in that. And so someone that comes to mind is Socrates, Greek philosopher, who taught, well, basically what happened for the short of it was, he was put on trial because he was teaching the importance of questioning, which I think now in our modern day, something we can think about with questioning those in authority and being able to bring critical thinking, which is another benefit of making burnout extinct, and bringing common sense and just noticing, okay, does it resonate for what people are telling you? Does it make sense? And he was doing that with the youth, and he was found guilty. And there was like two options that he was given. I forget I think the other option, I don't know exactly what the other option was, but the one he took was that he was going to drink this poison, and ultimately it was going to kill him. And so he chose to do that just to be able to stick to what he knew was the truth. And that's inspiring. I mean, fuck, damn. And there's so much courage in that, of just like sticking to your truth. But also the fear is that, well, he died. Like, he fucking died. And so going back to then this fear that we go back to, this fear of rejection, and going back to like back when we were way back in the day, where if you left the tribe, if you got kicked out of the tribe, you died. So of course it can feel like this big overwhelming thing. But at the same time, what I want to tell you is context is really important. Remembering the time that you live in, the rights that you have. I think about that here in the US, the right of freedom of speech. Like, it's being able to notice these situations. Like, I'm talking to a friend. They're someone I trust. I can share how I truly feel. Like, being able to step in front of this group and share with them knowledge and information. If that's on stage or in a more intimate setting, like, they're there to want to learn. Okay, that's context. Like, they're going to be on my side. And so that's one strategy I really want to hit home for you, is the importance to remember that ultimately, if you are in these situations of public speaking, or if it's in front of a group or in front of individuals, frame it as these people are on your team. You can think of them as friends. If they're literal friends, then it's easier, but like, think about them as people on your team. You show up differently when you don't think of them as the enemy. It's such a different form of sensations that can come up from the body. That's where your shoulders can relax a little bit more. You can be like, oh, all right, let me like take a breath. Like that's a moment to be able to just sink into it, instead of like trying to think potentially hours or days of what is a response you want to have. If that's through an email, through text message, okay, through having to call them back. Instead of having to go through that mental overload that can happen, it's being able to release that, so that you can put that and channel that energy into another way, a more productive way. Because when you are overthinking, what happens is you can also have the opportunity to lie. And you just think that's the easier route. You're going to go do that. You might have done that in the past. I want to tell you, I've been there. I've lied a lot. I'm not perfect either. And so you still have those moments where, you get off track. But with lying, what happens is then you're creating more effort mentally, because now you have to remember, what are the scenarios that you shared with this person? And then what were these other scenarios or things that you said to this other person? And then you're having to keep these narratives up, and that becomes exhausting in itself. And again, all of that is leading to a one-way ticket to hitting burnout if there's no changes that are being made. And again, the burnout beast is like ready to go. It's like, fuck yeah, I got you, tracking you, and I don't want that for you. And so bringing it on back to Socrates, I find it interesting to tie back into habits, because Socrates taught Plato, and then Plato taught Aristotle. And Aristotle has this really powerful quote about habits. It's, when it comes to the history of habits, this is what I could, this is where in my work of researching it, I found like, okay, this is where it really started for habits, of understanding it on a deeper level of what they are. And he has this really powerful quote that I want to share with you, which is, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit. And it's something I want to bring into this mission to make burnout extinct, is the importance of questioning, of understanding for you, what are going to be these burnout proof habits that are energizing for you. That's how I think about burnout proof habits, are the ones that are energizing. And in this area specifically of communication, it's really important to give yourself the best chance to feel less drained, is a starting point, and then finding opportunities to feel energized in this area, because you're going to be doing a lot of communication. I think about that is in the day-to-day, like you're having to deal with communication, even potentially throughout the day. So it's honoring that this is where you're going to spend a lot of time and a lot of energy that you're going to be putting in this area. And so I go back to another quote from a person I really admire, someone I consider a mentor, John Butcher, where he says, there is no one right way, but there is a right way for you. And so it's figuring out, as I'm going to go through these simple strategies to share with you, figuring out which one resonates, and then pick one to implement to start the momentum with starting small. So some of the strategies, I've already talked about one, which is that imagine people are on your team. You can even have conversations with them and realize that you have a lot of similarities. And so that can help you, for your body, to prepare for whatever you're doing. If that is speaking in front of a group of people for presentation, or if that's just talking to one person, you can come at it from a preparation for the body that this person is on my team. We're coming to work together in some way, somehow. Doesn't mean it's actually going to happen, but it's having the body feel more relaxed instead of in this stress, preparing for the stress responses that are happening and the potential perceived threats, because it's such a different energy than how you're communicating. Because when you're in a stress response, what happens for the body is then you're getting cortisol pumped into the body for that hormone. It's then going to cause certain parts of the brain to be less active and then others to be hyperactive. And this is where you can lose, when it comes to the information that you wanted to share. It's like that thought of like, oh, I wanted to say that, or man, I wanted to make sure I got that point across and I wasn't able to do it. Well, because you were dealing with like an intense amount of effort required to like go back to that info and find that info because you're in this stress response. And so the more relaxed you can get, the easier it is to recall the information that you want to share, to be able to connect with the people that you're talking to, and overall create a better experience for yourself. And so that can be one strategy to try. The other strategy to be able to try is taking, I know it sounds silly, but taking deep breaths before you're about to either step up on stage or about to have that conversation. I learned this from the person, from Eric Edmeades, person who I learned a lot from when it comes to speaking. And it's just taking like those deep breaths in to relax. And let's actually do that. We're going to do that right now. So let's take 3 deep breaths and just get settled in. And you can take a moment to observe, how do you feel after doing these 3 deep breaths? Ready? So deep inhale. And then release. You sit on out. Nice. Another one. Here we go. Deep inhale. And then release. Final one. And release. There we go. I want to remind you again, you're not alone in this. I was able to find that like something like close to 50% of people have some form of, anxiety around public speaking. This fear of going out there and communicating how they feel and their ideas and their beliefs and their strategies that they want to share. Like, you're not alone in that. And I remember for me, my first networking event I went to, I had set the intention of wanting to go out there and just be able to communicate the truth of how I was feeling in certain moments, my ideas. And I could remember the shaking that was happening, right? You may feel that too in moments where you're just feeling like the body's shaking and it's so hard to control it. You're heavy breathing, like, oh, heart is racing and pounding. The pressure and the tension is building. I've been there and I had it on that day because I'd set the intention of wanting to, to be able to connect. And I went in there. I remember I went into the building, went into the elevator, went up to, it was like on the 2nd floor of this building. And then there was this like long hallway when I got out of the elevator, and the event was happening in the room all the way at the end. And I just remembered like that building of pressure and tension as I was walking towards the door. And as I got closer to that door, I could see groups of people all mingling, hanging out, talking right before the event was going to start. And I got to the doorway and I just like froze. Like, I had a stress response. I froze. And at the time I didn't know it, but I'm like, oh man, like I'm in the stress response right now. My body is getting hit with like this fear response. But I didn't know at the time. And so what happened was I turned around and I left. I walked back down the hallway. I had this moment of like, do I go back? Do I not? The uncertainty was building. And I remembered grabbing my phone out of my hand because there was people that were walking by. And I then had a fake phone conversation with myself, just to be like, oh yeah, I'm having a great time. This is awesome. Just ridiculous. Like looking like a crazy person. Just having, if people knew that I was having a fake phone conversation. And so then of course I'm embarrassed and I'm like, fuck this shit. I get into the elevator, go out the building, and I'll leave and I'll walk out. I'm like, I'm done. And I got so pissed at myself and so angry at myself, but I also didn't give up. And that was nearly 10 years ago. And it's been a buildup of having to work on this and put the reps in, making plenty of mistakes along the way, where now, I've spoken in front of hundreds of people. I've been able, when it comes to this show, sharing with you information and insights, sharing that if that's on social media, going to different events and talking about this mission when it comes to make burnout extinct, being able to get excited about doing that in the future rather than scared and nervous about doing that. And the nerves are still gonna be there. So I want to say that, like, nervousness is still there, but I connect that to the excitement. And that's something else that was taught to me. And it's another strategy to share with you, is that this was from Eric Edmeades that I learned this, is that nervousness and excitement create similar body sensations. The heart pounding, sweat, sweating, this feeling of like the tingles. And so how you can reframe it is to know that is to make sure that you remember you're going to have a positive outcome. That's where then excitement can grow, rather than feeling like it's going to be a bad outcome or negative outcome, where that's where you can feel more nervous. And so it's just framing it for yourself of like, all right, this is going to be a good experience. Like, I got this. And so that's another strategy to implement. And the other one is to remember that you can tell yourself you're going to survive this. Have you had those moments where you're like, oh shit, I don't know if I'm going to survive this? Going back to the fear of the rejection and like, what can happen? Death can happen. But it's remembering the context of the environment that you're in for when you're communicating. It's remembering that you can survive this and telling yourself that to help you to, again, take that pressure off that can build and close out those stress loops. And so that's another one. And then the other one is to practice. And so this is literally, you can go at it from two different ways. One way is going at it with just people you don't know and practicing. And so having any opportunity to talk to people, if that's just at the restaurant, local restaurant, if that is, I think about the farmer's market coming up. So like going to the farmer's market, talking to some of the farmers in the stand, but just communicating and sharing how I feel about, I'm trying to think of an example right now. It would be like, oh, I really like strawberries. So like communicating, I really like strawberries. And so being able to just practice that way to start small. And then the other option you can do for strategy is actually to share something that can feel you can feel nervous about sharing to someone you trust. It can feel like a secret, one of those secrets you got that you want to share. Maybe it's how you're feeling right now, or what's going on in the business. Or it could be just like how things, when it comes to things that have happened in the past that you haven't addressed, being able to share that with someone you trust. And I believe this is where it's going to be more courageous to do that for someone that you trust, is how I look at it. If that was what happened for me, I remembered having to tell my parents when I moved back in after hitting my burnout. I had to move back in with my parents because financially and emotionally, I was in a really tough place. The pandemic had just hit. And so I felt like I got to be back with family. And that's where I had to tell them the truth of everything I lied about. I had to tell them, because if not, it all bubbled up. And I remember a few days before I did that, or I think it might've been just the day before, I had to go to the hospital because I had what I felt like was, this anxiety attack. You could think about it, or panic attack. Like, the heart was pounding. It was going through my chest. I thought something was wrong. And, I could barely breathe. And so I was like, I gotta go to the hospital. But when the message I got from the body sensation was that you got to tell them the truth. And so I was like, all right, I got to do this and share it. And so it's going to be more courageous to do that. But then after I did that, I just felt this weight off my shoulders. No matter what they were going to say, no matter what my mom was going to say, I just felt the weight off my shoulders. Like, I did it. And I remember she gave me a beautiful gift of saying, hey, we still love you. Like, we're still going to be here. But either way, I knew I did this for me. I was able to be proud of myself in that moment, to share that and express that. And so that's something else that you can try. And so these are different ways, when it comes to the recap of it, different ways that you can start to work through this. It's going to be a gradual process of putting in those reps, but it's remembering too, along the way, what are the body sensations that come up for you for that resistance? Because you may experience those resistance, and it's remembering that with any new habit, it can create uncertainty from the body. And so this habit that you're going to implement of wanting to share the truth, how you're feeling, your beliefs, your ideas, that is a new habit. And so with that uncertainty, that can create natural resistance from the body. And it's remembering to honor that resistance, but not using it as an excuse to stop doing it, to stop moving forward. And it's just remembering that I go back to the habit formation process, the 3 phases, which is the awkward phase, where it's going to be a little awkward at the beginning. It's going to be messy. Then you have the angry phase, where there's some real resistance that can come up, especially for certain things that you want to share. Especially, I think of people that you trust that you want to share with. And then you have the third one, where it's the autopilot phase, where then it just becomes easier. It's just like you're just going through the motions of it. I think of the habit of like brushing your teeth. There's low friction there. And so you will have natural resistance that could come up. It's to honor that and then realize you can move through it. And also it's coming back to what is something that you want to share. That's your truth. Like it comes back to how you're truly feeling. It may be hard to articulate that. And so it's just noticing in your body sensation or in your body, what are the sensations that come up when you are sharing something that is truthful? Connect to that so that you can be reminded whenever you get off track. Because you're going to have those moments where you might be like, you might lie. And then you can notice that there could be a change. How I think about that for me, for like, to give you an example, when I know it's something that's truthful, it's like I can notice it in my stomach. I notice a sensation there, like a little ping or charge. Also my heart too. And then I know when I lie, what happens is like I get the buzzing in my head, like this buzzing head of like, okay, now I gotta think through who I told this to, what to remember. And so that's how I can notice whenever I get off track. Because in the moment, you just might miss it. You're moving so fast in your communication, you just might miss it. But when you can recognize when you didn't say the truth, and actually another important strategy is actually then admit that and admit the mistake, like be able to own up to that. That's such an important strategy for then the body to realize, oh, you can survive this and that you will be able to recover from mistakes that you make. And then the other strategy is to celebrate the effort. I've talked about it before, literally physically celebrate it for the body. How I do it is tap both my shoulders, raise my arms up, and I go, yeah. I've talked about before how I didn't start that way. So it goes back to where you start isn't going to be where I end up. But it reminds the body that you want more of this when you celebrate. And it can be a way for the body to release dopamine, which then creates an internal reward that helps you to continue that momentum. And when you can create that momentum, it's so much easier to keep going with it. Right? It doesn't mean you're not going to get off track, because that happens, but just it helps to be easier to show up and put those reps in when you're celebrating that effort. All right, so let's get through the recap here. So you got the new habit of being able to share just what comes through for you for the words. Now, what's going to happen is there can be natural resistance that can come up from the body with this. It's honoring that resistance, but realizing you can move through it. Start small with this. So that could be moments throughout the day, if that's going for a walk and you're talking to someone, or if it's at a restaurant, or if it's, a farmer's market I was talking about, like with all these different moments, just share what is a true feeling for you, what is an idea you have, what is an opinion, being able to share that. And then remembering that you have different ways you could do this. You could share it with strangers. You could share it that you just met. You could share it with people that you trust as well. And for me, I always come back to like the deeper things, the secrets. It's so important to be able to share that with people you trust, that those one or two people, it could be just one or two people that you trust, and having that opportunity to be able to do that and step into that, because then it can really help to remind the body that you can survive this and you can move through this. And then just release that pressure and that tension. And going back to another strategy, reminding yourself that you can survive this. Depending on the context, when it comes to speaking in front of groups of people, in front of one person, remembering that you can survive this, coming back to that for the body, and remembering they're on your team. Coming back to that, they're on your team, and figuring out the solution together. What I want to remind you, if you haven't heard it yet today, is I believe in you. You're absolutely capable of being able to recognize these signals from the body, to learn from those signals of what needs to be changed in the behavior and the habits in your day, and to make those changes, to be able to then move towards making burnout extinct, because it absolutely is possible for you. You have the capabilities as a human being to make this happen. And you got this.